Hey, what's up? This is Seth, and for my Final Vision Tech project, I chose to build a home server for my house. This required me to get an old computer and install Ubuntu Server on it. And before I go any farther, I just want to let everyone know that's watching this video, I'm a complete noob when it comes to Ubuntu and servers. That I've never really dealt with anything with them. So this was mainly learning how to build a server and how to use Ubuntu. My main learning goal was to build a server for my house and learn a little bit about Ubuntu. For my tools, I actually had quite a few resources. I use Ubuntu Server and the application Samba to host my server. You could say that those were the two resources that I used that I got to work. I tried some other stuff, especially like on Ubuntu desktop, but I was never able to get that to work. So therefore I switched to Ubuntu Server since that's what its sole purpose is. To make my actual server, I found a good guide by Gaguda55 Tech Tutorials on YouTube. It was a pretty good tutorial and what I give credit to be able to make my server. I have by no means mastered servers, but I definitely have a better base than before. Speaking of that, I really knew nothing. I'd like to give I guess you could say, shout out to anyone in the Ubuntu help forums that I read to help me build my project, because I wouldn't have been able to do this without the people that commented in the forums. For my project plan review, things didn't quite go out the way I wanted them to, but I guess that's alright. I remember at the beginning, Mrs. Dink told me that I was going to have some difficulties getting my server to start. And I didn't really believe her because I was like, I have this guide here. I'll just follow this and things will be good. Well, it just wasn't able to quite work that way. I also had to choose between two computers. The first computer I chose to use was one that I had at home, and I couldn't get even Ubuntu desktop to install on it, which is what I wanted to do on it because we hadn't used it in a long time. But I also wanted to use it because it had a bigger hard drive than the one I used. But I still might switch this one after I learn more on how to do some server stuff. So you could say that I didn't follow my plan very well, and in fact, I didn't even look at it after turning it in because things were going well. And so at the beginning, I just had to reevaluate what I wanted to do and go from there as I worked. When one thing didn't work, I always found another idea to use until I found one that worked, and that's what I used. So like I said earlier, Gaguda55 Tech Tutorials had a great tutorial that I used, and is pretty much how I was able to make my server. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the video of what he did and what I had to change so I could make my server, since his video is a couple years old. So the first step was to download Ubuntu Server. What I had to do was go to Ubuntu's website, download the Ubuntu Server, and I had to get the 32-bit OS because the computer I had couldn't handle 64-bit. And then you have to burn that to a CD and then stick it in your computer and turn it on. And then you're greeted with a message like this. And so it's pretty easy here at the beginning. Just follow the steps. Nice and casual. You make your user account and a username, partition your hard drive. It's all good. Partitioning your hard drive was something I didn't know anything about at the beginning of this project, but after installing NOS 3 times, Ubuntu Desktop twice, and Ubuntu Server, I kind of knew what I was doing when it came to partitioning them. You had to make sure you made first the server. You needed to make sure you have a partition for Ubuntu Server, and then you need some swap area too. When it came to software selection, I skipped all this and just hit continue because I wanted to download it later so I could have the most up-to-date software. And so then it just became a lot of waiting, watching code flash on your screen, which can make you feel really smart, but you're actually not doing anything. So I was finally greeted with this wonderful page where I was able to put my username and password in. And one of the first things I had to do was get root access. I didn't know exactly what root was when I first started, but I definitely do now. If you ever see in like Linux code, if you see the word sudo, that's pretty much what root is. If you type in su, that will give you root access, so then you don't need sudo then. Okay. My next part was I needed to... Okay, so my next part was to set up my network interfaces. First thing you needed to do was change this to static here, since for a server you want a static IP address, which means that your IP will never change. Like each time with your computer you log on to your router, the router assigns your computer an IP address. With the server, you're going to want the same one every time. So each computer knows what it is to connect to it when you want to connect to your server. So I made a server address. It wasn't the same as this. I had the same net mask, I believe the same network. I had a little bit different broadcast because I had to look all this up earlier of what I had for my own personal situation. I also had a different gateway. So that was the interfaces. And so far, when I first started, everything was going good. Then the next part, when I wanted to upgrade my system, I got a bunch of error messages. And this is when I did some research and I found out about the Google DNS server stuff, and that's when I did that, and I guess you could say it solved my problems. So the next step was to install the server client. So I installed the following applications here, and after letting that run for a while, it was time. Actually, before I did this, I made my folders here for my server. I made a personal folder called Seth, and I also did make a public folder, but I haven't quite set the permissions how I want them to yet, so I'll do that later. So the next part here was configuring my server with Samba. So pretty much what Gaguda55 did through here was go down this big old long list of telling you what to change and what not to change. That worked for his version, but again, this video is 2 years old, and so things have changed. So some stuff wasn't quite the same. So again, I guess you could say a shout out to Ubuntu help forums, where I found some information to be able to go through and change and get what I needed to get changed so I could do my server. So like here at the end, this wasn't here, and I had to type all this in to get my folders. And then the last part was how to access them on Windows, Ubuntu, and Mac, and which is what I'll do next. Okay, for the last part, I need to connect to my server. So I'm here on a Mac, and to connect my server, I want to go up to Finder, Go, Network, and right here I got my servers, and it's called Seth Server 2. And as you see, it's connected as guest. And I don't allow guests into my server. I have it locked, and so as you can see, I can't see any of the folders, so I'm going to need to connect as a registered user. So my user account name is Seth, type in my password, and now I'm connected as Seth. Right here, I just have one file right here. As you can see, I've also accessed this file on a Windows computer that I wrote here, and I can also go to the public files folder. One thing I need to do, I want to change my permissions, is I want to change the public files, maybe so guests can connect to it. I can also make other folders for other users. Like if I could make a folder for a user named John, and then I could make an account for John. And I can just, the name for the account can be John. He can make a password, and then only when the user is John can connect to would be John's folder. And then, but then he couldn't connect to Seth's folder. Like all projects, learning is the most important part, and I did plenty of that. I had many failures and just a few successes, but I learned to never give up, because there were a few times where one thing didn't work, and I just kind of wanted to say this is too hard for me and just find something else to do. But I ended up I kept looking online and finding more information to help me fix my problems. Like one of my big problems was with my DNS servers, and to fix my problem I ended up using a Google domain server, and I'm very thankful for that. So thank you for watching my project review.